Recording to the cloud. We're on.
Perfect. Let me pull out and the right window here and share. All right, welcome to the May 16th edition of the KUDO community meeting. I'm Gerred Dillon, and today we're going to just talk about a couple different issues. A lot of us are in office today in Hamburg, so that's pretty awesome. So we're going to go through a couple open caps. The application operator cap I'll update on. We got a framework developer CRD cap going, and I'll give we'll turn over to Ken for that. We have the testing framework testing cap 7 or 8 that I'll turn over to Justin, and then we'll go over the skeleton generator and previous values caps, which are a little bit stale, and we need to discuss about either advancing forward or putting on hold for the time being. So with that, I guess I'll jump in. The application operator cap will be pretty short. We came to a decision, and so KEP 2 has been moved to implementable. And what KEP 2 is about is we've separated out the framework development, the instance CRD, into a 5-step migration from instance to dynamic CRDs. We've added stories into the project for that, and so we can start proceeding with that development on that next week. And hopefully by the end of next week, we can actually update that status to implemented or done for the moment.
Can you define implemented there?
Well, I guess we're only on step 2 of 5 there, so we'll still be implementable. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so
That's fine.
we'll just call 2 of those user stories done and keep that open until we can get to the fully dynamic. That's it for me. With that, I'll turn it over to Ken for KEP 2 and talking about the framework developer CRD and our work on that SDK.
Can you hear me from here?
Yeah.
Okay. We are talking about the KEP that is intended to be landing as KEP 9, right? For a toolkit?
Yes. Let me go to that.
I want to make sure I heard KEP 2 and I didn't.
Yeah. We just finished on KEP 2.
Okay, so yeah, I think the minimum viable product for like a KEP to land, I think we talked about having the kind of the statement or summary as well as the motivation and then goals. So we don't have that complete yet. What's landed in the PR is a discussion point around what we're calling the operator toolkit. The toolkit's intended to be this language that's supposed to help us get around some of the limitations and challenges we've been having. So I don't want to apply, well, after we have some discussion, we'll then want to land this with some proposals. We've already kind of started on this a little bit, and in some ways I feel like it's enabled us to have a more intelligent conversation. Some of the things we've looked at, well, what we have landed already in code is using customize along with mustache, and the result is a lot of YAML, a lot of verbosity, and YAML in YAML, which are some multi-line YAML that's not verifiable until it's actually leveraged. So those are the kind of the pain points. Tom is the one that has reviewed it so far. I'd like to get everybody to have some input on it. Then I will make the adjustments to the KEP and then update the PR again. And then hopefully land that. I'd like to actually merge that in as soon as we have the goals defined, and then we can start tossing around proposals. So the goals, as they're proposed by Tom, I think pretty much cover it. You know, we have a lot of verbosity. We'd like to get YAML out of YAML or make it more verifiable up front. I think there's a small, well, mustache becomes problematic when we're using config maps, so we need to resolve that. And if we could reduce the verbosity, we would like that as well. And there's some thought that we could get rid of customize. That's not necessarily a goal, but if we could keep within the same toolkit, the same experience, that would be beneficial, I think. That's what we've talked so far. So that's that KEP. It's currently pull request 237.
I would really like to. So we have a couple of decent proposals going on in various stages of maturity. We have the HackMD that Tom and I worked on, which was going all in on customized. That has some issues. We have this idea of Q. And we've even talked about other off the wall ideas like using webhooks and pushing off the templating problem.
Right.
And so what I'd like to like what we should do as part of this when we go to this proposal, maybe we split this into while we're in this PR proposal A, B, and C, that we list out everything we've thought about here inside of this, and just mark at the end which one we've selected and we're implementing.
I think that's a great idea, and we ought to probably add in pros and cons for each one. I don't think there's a solid winner. I think there's like some balance that we're going to come to.
Yeah, but then we have at the end of that 3 or 4 fully featured ways of implementing a framework, right? And we need to exactly like look at those pros and cons that you mentioned and pick one and go. Elena started a really good document. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Instead of pros and cons, I would rather use the requirements. I don't know if it was a hard requirements, but at the top of that HackMD, we had a set of goals for dynamic CRDs. And I would rather build a table that talks through implementation details about each one of those items and have a more cohesive single view on everything. And I don't know, maybe in yellow, red, or can do, can probably do, or can't do, and then kind of looking at that. But I always find pro cons lists end up being too spread out to really compare implementations.
Okay.
Just some anecdotal feedback here from having talked about KUDO last week, talking about Q as a possible solution to that, and several people came up to me afterwards and talked about how that looked to them a much easier way of defining this stuff than YAML looks generally.
Good feedback, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really
Interesting feedback, because I kind of get both sometimes, which is some people want to see the YAML they're used to. Like, I know this deployment works. I know it's exactly what I'm looking for. I just want it to be managed by an operator in a certain way. And then there's this other feedback of I'm tired of looking at YAML. So
well, I think from my perspective, the first thing that I saw when I looked at Q was how much it reminded me of languages like Puppet. That kind of DSL like stuff. And I think from an operator's perspective, an operator as in a human being operator, those kind of things conceptually are more familiar to them than looking at really long stuff in YAML. YAML's kind of been forced on a lot of folk because of Kubernetes, right? But historically in that world, people were, they look at something like that and they go, that kind of makes sense to me conceptually in my brain because I'm used to other things that look a bit like that. And again, that's purely anecdotal and nothing to do with the actual internal functionality of Q and whether it solves that problem or not. But
I think this speaks to Gerred's webhook point. Really what we're doing is we're building an interface that renders into Kubernetes objects. It takes a plan, a step, a phase, a CRD object with some arguments and turns it into raw Kubernetes. And that's kind of the challenge we're ultimately tackling, and whether we implement that with Mustache and Customize or Q, maybe we do abstract it out as webhooks and we allow people who like the simplicity of Q to do that, or like the simplicity or clarity of using Mustache YAML to do that. That kind of leaves it up to the individual, and then we have our own provided default renderers that take some Q and render it, and take some Customize and render it. But if they want to build something else with JSON it, or they have a Java thing that they like. No one would actually do that, I hope, but they could do that if they decide that that's their.
You can use SOAP packages.
Do you think, Tom, and I'm leaning to yes, and I want to hear your thoughts, do you think you could do that in a way that does not drastically change the user experience, where you now have to go deploy yourself a webhook server? Like could we embed that in a way for our defaults, right? Like if you want to follow our happy path, your experience doesn't change much from what it does today, right?
I think so. And what I think would happen is we'd have an internal compiler that would understand YAML and understand Q files. And if you define your framework versions like we currently do, the key of all those things are .yamls. It understands how to do those and combine them. But if it's a .q file, it understands how to, oh, I got to import kudo.core. Great, I know how to do that. I know how to render these things with proper parameters. And then the CRDs just get turned into Q objects that get provided to the compilation.
Right. But we would work at the same where it's a webhook, but just we have our own built-in webhook parser or handler that is auto magical for our happy path. Right. But then
right. So either a framework
you want to optionally add in a webhook. Okay. Now it's not pointing at it itself. It points wherever you want. Something like that.
Hey, John, you're fine, brother. It's all right. We all understand. So don't get panicked about that.
No. Tom and I will.
No. I was talking about this
background noise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just try to make it feel comfortable. We all been in that position.
Yeah, my 7-year-old quite happily to wander into the meeting.
It happened to the CNN reporter or BBC. Yeah, right, exactly.
I know.
I liked your idea of I see a table probably of like features and like capabilities, like a flag of whether a certain technology has that ability. That's what I envisioned when you offered that up a few minutes ago. I'm a little concerned that there's some caveats or things, and I kind of feel like it might be more common than not. So as an example, Q will probably get rid of the need to do merge patching if we have it at the server, but will not if we have it at the client. And so I don't know if that's two proposals with or if it's one with caveats. And so I that's why I say.
I think with the webhook idea, that also goes away, right? Because your queue is now being executed in a webhook. So even if you're storing queue in a config map, it ends up being an endpoint. We'll have to flush that one out a lot more before we can, because I'm just saying like what immediately jumps to my mind, but it may work totally differently.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I see kind of three options right now for defining a framework version, and one is the YAML that we have now, if this is how we choose to go. One's the queue, and then one is a just webhook URL that adheres to a certain Swagger spec that we provide. And I don't know if our YAML and queue get deployed on their own as servers that implement that Swagger spec, or whether internally to KUDO we perform the same functionality, and we have a client that implements the interface that uses for the webhook. Otherwise, it implements it for actual local execution for the queue and the YAML. But yeah, that seems like a flexible solution that would allow defaults to be there and to be rendered nicely. But if someone needs to do something crazy, as you guys talked about, talking to external systems, build your webhook that has all those clients in there and can go query your AWS account if that's kind of one of the parameters that needs to get updated dynamically.
Should we, after this community meetings, divide up the different pieces of this so that we can all have a coherent part of the story for next week? Because obviously this is a lot for a couple of us to tackle. So I'll raise it up in the KUDO chat, and we can move on for now, but we'll start to divide this up and conquer.
I mean, just before we move on from that point, I mean, I guess there is the other thing to take into account looking at things like Q is it's basically developed by one guy. And, so if something happens to that one guy and, KUDO is depending on it.
You're right. It would take a contribution of KUDO to be a supporter of Q, and I think we'd have to be upstream in that language and not depend on it on its own.
Yeah.
So that'll be part of our table, number of contributors, 1. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, with that, I'd like to I'll turn it over to Justin if you want to do an update on that. If Cap 8 has been moved to implementable, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add there, update there, any more thinking, but.
Not really. Hoping to start on the implementation early next week. But beyond that, not really any updates, I don't think.
Okay, sounds good. So move. Go ahead.
I think Marcin had some questions about it, so we've been discussing back and forth. So hopefully we'll have some good results out of that as well.
Okay, fantastic. Moving on, we have two caps here that have been sitting for a little while. They're getting a little stale. One is the skeleton generator, and one is updated or passing in previous values. To talk about previous values first, I am tempted to downgrade this to an issue as more of a consideration, given that Kubernetes architecture, this is hard to do in the first place, and we're trying to be declarative and remove some of that imperative, those imperative bits. And KUDO should just take care of the reconciliation of one state to the other, right? And then previous values become less necessary. How does everyone feel about that? I don't see this as a KUDO problem.
Right, I'm on board. I haven't seen or heard of a good use case where looking at the current cluster setup gives you that doesn't give you that information that you would need if you did need to know whether you're going up and down in replicas or what your current environment variable was.
Okay.
But I'm open to hearing other. I know Denis had strong feelings on this.
Yeah. Any opposition to moving this one and just rejecting closing it? Going once? Okay, so got all thumbs up. Great. I'll move that out. I'll PR that afterwards. Now on to the skeleton generator. This one Denis worked on and made some progress on. It is getting a little bit stale. It doesn't really have a direct owner right now. So I'd love for an owner. I think this is a very necessary thing, and is a separate cap from our CLI. Does someone want to adopt this cap and keep it going? Should we reject it and open a new generation cap?
Do we have a label that says like needs an owner or something that we label them things?
No, that'd be a good label though.
Okay, and then so what's the progress that we have with this one right now, and also like how would that differentiate a little bit with the toolkit that we're looking at? That's
a good question.
There's definitely dependencies. We need to know what we're getting to as a skeleton. So.
Okay, maybe that generator could be part of the toolkit.
So we could just move this as superseded by cap 9.
That would be our first superseded one, yeah, and that would be at least from my standpoint. Like I don't know yet, we haven't finished entirely with the non-goals and everything. The toolkit one, right?
I like where you're going with that. I think updating the motivation and goals of KEP 9, or what we think will be KEP 9, to include the ability to audit. It's a toolkit, right? The ability to automate that productivity of a developer is super smart. I think that's where that makes sense to me where it goes.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you do a PR in that cap to add that as a goal of that cap as well, just so that we can be clear about that PR should supersede the generator and add as a goal to that 237 PR.
Yeah, and I pinged also Denis and asked him what he thinks about it. But yeah, so as soon as I get back from him, we'll do that.
Sure. Okay, and that takes us to, I just added this in here. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. Is there any discussion you want that we should have around the registry and CLI at this point, or no?
Sure, yeah, I can give an update where we are right now. So like I shared also in our KUDO channel the actual doc that I'm working on right now on HackMD. And so
I can give you share if you want.
Yep, that would be great. Let's just, there we go. So that should be this one here. And so I'm just developing this right now. So I wrote the summary, the motivation, the goals, and the non-goals, and now I'm basically down at the user stories here. And so I'm thinking by the end of today I'll make a PR for this one, and what it discusses is essentially like also the way how we think about the packages and how they should be distributed, and how the structure of the Cube Builder framework repo needs to look like to support this. And this has also then indirect or tangents to how the CLI will look like. So I think this is a very important cap that needs to be implemented first before we can actually also then continue working on the CLI and so forth. And yeah, so that's the current state. And then for the CLI part, Elena is also super interested in the CLI part, so like we're working there together on things. And if more people want to like contribute also with the package cap to just share their ideas, they are more than welcome. And the status right now is provisional. And so as soon as we feel like good with it, we would make it implemented and then implementable and then hopefully implemented. That's the latest update on this one. And I give my screen back to you. Are there more questions or so? Maybe we want to talk about some questions yet, but I think there will be no questions before you haven't read through it. So I'll just make the PR and then you can see it and then we can discuss it in the review. Also curious, Tom, what you will think about it. So like waiting for your review as well. So I add you as a reviewer.
Sounds good. I'll check out the HackMD.
I have a question.
Yeah, oh, Zane, perfect. Yeah, Zane, glad you could make it. Zane, you said you had a few questions that you wanted to ask. Are they specific for the CLI or in general for other things?
CLI.
Sure, now's the time.
So yeah, the CLI I was going to ask if I have to read that cap first of all, and yeah, maybe it's already answered there, but I will ask a quick question. So are there any plans for dynamic CLI, like commands, let's say, to package related? So a framework developer can, in the spec of their framework, can say they support that commands, or they are like, there could be as simple as like pod exec, and some specific bash script inside the pod, and doesn't have to be, like supported. So I can do things as simple as like kubectl, KUDO, package Kafka or operator Kafka, create topic, or producer test, and I can actually support a large CLI commands out of the box without having to, like write them, each of them and release new version, or without generating code for them.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we're thinking about this already when we look into Q, and Q has this command exec that we like maybe add then for framework developers, but that's discussed, I think, in which cap would that be discussed? I think that would be in the dynamic CRD, and where we're thinking of how we store Q and how framework version will look like. But we discussed a little bit earlier. I know you joined a little bit later. So that's like in the beginning of this meeting, we talked about how the framework version should look like, if it should just stay as a YAML, if we do it with Q and so forth, or the third one was this, I think, webhook that Tom also thought about. So we don't have an answer yet for it, but we're thinking about it, and so we ask ourselves the same question. But
it is a user story on the CLI cap, and I linked it in chat here, that we want the ability for framework developers to be able to provide CLI calls specific to their framework, configured against the instance that they're talking about. So being able to, I don't know if it's port forward or start a job that has the right environment variable set to talk to the MySQL cluster, the Flink instance, whatever it is, specify your image so that you have the right tooling in there. And the implementation detail is going to be very specific to how we end up defining our framework version, but that is a user story, and I think there's been expressed a lot of interest in that capability.
Right, and that is, but also user story that kind of depends already on the actual implementation on KUDO's side, how we come up with. So we're kind of like waiting there for that decision to be made, so we then like can translate it into our user story. Yeah.
If I may, I had a few thoughts about how we can version, and specifically how we can use registry to address a few points that are from.
Before
we
we
can do that
saying,
later,
was
yeah.
that answering your question? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the user story and it sounds good. Yeah, I will follow up later and read the cap. Thank you.
all right, cool. And coming back to the registry, and yeah.
Right. So I think the last community meeting, you kind of gave an overview and kind of a demo of how the registry
Could
works.
look like.
Could look like.
Yeah.
The one thing that I was particularly interested in is the fact that you could attach labels to a release.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that's a very convenient way for us to not only attach all the versioning schemes that we want,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly things such as, so in the SDK world, we have a concept of a minimum DCOS version, but we don't have a concept of a maximum DCOS version. And the reason for this is you can't see into the future,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know when a breaking package might occur.
Yeah.
So the idea with the registry having labels is that, down the line, if any package does break, we could easily just attach a label onto that package, and we could prevent, whoever's pulling the package down from not using that package.
Yeah, so there's like how's it called, deprecatable, or what's
Deprecated, yeah.
Deprecated, yes.
Yeah, so deprecated.
That's a Boolean with true, and then we had also tags where you could say that this is incubating or stable. That was one idea, two ideas.
So to kind of take that even further, what I was kind of going to propose was add a whole bunch of other things, such as security flags are set, there's a security violation there, and also maybe even use that to kind of manage all the Kubernetes versions that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you can say a min and max Kubernetes version, you can say a min and max framework version, and you'll have a pinned KUDO version to it. So that kind of gives you a multi-dimensional search tree that, the client can pull and it can see, I'm running it on this cluster, I have this capabilities, let's see which packages are kind of available to me, and, you can pick the latest version from that. So I felt like that ability to just have tags associated to a package in a registry is a fantastic way to just manage all this complexity.
Yeah, you can automatically create this matrix almost to see.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can add labels after the fact, so they're not kind of, as soon as you release a package, you don't have to have all the labels. So you can add things like deprecation, or there's a CVE vulnerability associated with this, please do not download it.
Yes, some are optional, and you could, in a later version, you could add them as well.
Yeah,
so that changes over time.
Yeah, so I feel like this is a much, given that in the DCOS SDK, we've kind of had, very hard-coded things baked into the package that are very difficult to remove after the fact. If you kind of have this nice ability and a system where you can just pull the labels, figure out exactly what's going on, it gives us enormous flexibility as to what we can do, and it's a much better way of handling it.
Yeah, I really like the idea also about security and making more effort into the security one. But now we should think about, is that part of the registry or the package cap, or would that be its own cap? Or subcap or something.
Yeah, so it does tie into how you kind of pull the packages and what the configuration of the cluster is and what you need.
Yeah.
It's kind of all tied in together. But I think we should, my main point here was that we should really leverage the ability to add labels and, use that to filter and
that's very good input.
Yeah.
Thanks.
More than anything else.
All right.
It kind of goes into this conformance of frameworks as well. I know there's a process for that in the operator framework provided by Red Hat. I think it's eventually going to be required to figure out what it means to certify a KUDO framework. And I don't know if we want to reach out to some of the open source security companies like Aqua and see what they're doing in the operator side, and whether they want to get involved with kind of the best practices for running things in Kubernetes and making sure that we can provide that certification to framework developers. I think that might be a good joint effort there between us and them. Because security is not my forte, I think we need to bring in actual security people, and not just security people, but security in containers and Kubernetes, and kind of reach out to that community.
Yep.
But I think security is its own KEP, because there's conversations on securing frameworks, making sure they're configured right, but then from the operator side, what permissions does a framework actually have the ability to do? Right now, we have the ability to delete objects inside of our framework version, some objects should not be able to be deleted by an instance. But right now, there is no control on that.
Yeah, that's also things with sandboxing and how that will look like in Kubernetes, right? So like there are a bunch of things that maybe it's good to have like other open source projects like cooperate with us or get their ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, even today, a nefarious plan could install a new cluster admin service account, right, and have a
Or
job
delete the
to
Kubernetes
RMR
API
every cluster.
service. And no one else could use the Kubernetes API inside the cluster.
I mean, they could just be bold enough and create a Bitcoin miner framework that ready for install.
Should we call it the Tesla enabler?
Yeah, that sounds great.
That means we have GPU support in KUDO. I love it.
Make money with KUDO. That's the new goal. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. We can of course end early, but this is a time for open discussion and wrap up, and we'll ideally set a time for next week, but we may maybe we'll do that offline. So what does everyone want to discuss? Any questions? Any other proposals, things we didn't cover here? Yeah, we can go back to any of these steps for more discussion. Anything anybody wants to talk about?
I would just be curious about the community part. So have we kind of already submitted some stuff to KubeCon Seattle? I'm currently working on a kind of workshop over here in Munich. And actually, I must say, I saw Denise stuff that's just super cool and helpful for that. And so I'm just curious whether we should maybe even make that like a part of the reoccurring agenda. Of course, I feel like one of our important goals right now is to kind of expand the community, right?
Right, yeah. So Matt, I don't know what you've done. I have not submitted for KubeCon San Diego yet.
No. So is the CFP open yet for
Yep.
I think it's open.
Yes, it's open since I believe last week or the week even before.
Right, okay. So yes, there is a plan to submit some stuff for that. I'll get together with whoever else wants to submit from here and submit some CFPs, submit some abstracts. On meetups, I've got a program of meetup stuff about to start across the EMEA and the US.
Okay.
But it all depends on getting accepted, obviously, as you know, Jorg. So.
Cool. I mean, I would actually just try to facilitate that also through the community meetings, right? To just talk about like what upcoming events are there, where can we actually help other people to submit stuff. Maybe also just, hey, I don't have time to submit, but that would be a cool event.
Yep.
And I guess mostly also just share resources. I'm just finishing up a PR to kind of add so basically slides and talks and material we already have to make it easier for people. So if you have anything there, just ping me and I can add it also to that PR, or you can just create another PR follow-up.
Yeah, I owe you a slide deck, don't I? I've forgotten.
I know.
I promised you that in Berlin.
Okay. Silence. Are you still there, Gerred?
Yeah, I just
Wonderful.
was I sitting really still?
I think.
Yeah, well, if it's an open mic and there's nothing else,
Yeah.
Through Gerred's suggestion, I took a look at CodeStream, which is a plugin for VS Code and IntelliJ, which means Golang, and it is absolutely amazing to be able to have conversations about code without a PR, like pre-PR, right? You're working, collaborating across the world. There's an integration into the community, I'm unsure, a private channel by that company, and there's and it integrates with Slack, and the Slacks are pretty awesome because it puts in the highlight of code that you put in with the link to GitHub for that particular thing with the comment, and any thread on it shows up in your editor. So it's free to open source, so it includes us. I would prefer that we use the KUDO under Kubernetes Slack channel, but we can't without getting permission. But I'd advertise it here so that everybody knows about it, becomes aware of it. It just seems like a really great collaborative tool.
So the permissions needs to be added on Slack, Kubernetes Slack, so we can use it there.
If we want to use that Slack channel, yeah. Otherwise, we could host maybe a channel that we make public, or we could use whatever code stream.
Do other projects use it in the Kubernetes Slack already?
Haven't seen.
No.
Okay.
My guess is, given that's a 40,000 person Slack, and CodeStream asks for everyone's emails and all Slack messages, my guess is Kubernetes is probably not going to do it.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure out whether we want.
Well, but it's worth looking at it and trialing out. And so it has a plugin for Goland as well.
Yeah, which is great. Which means now you can switch between your editors and you have the thread of conversations. You can resolve those conversations. You have a lot. If someone's answering questions, you could actually star one of the answers so it pops higher in the thread within the editor. There's a lot of just really neat collaborative type things that can happen, especially when you have disconnected teams or
distributed
teams. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, that's a worth mentioning. Have you been paid by them too?
I know. I sound like I'm selling it, and I can't believe it's taken this long in our the history of development
to have something like this.
And I love the fact that you don't have to be committed to it. If you're in the Slack channel, you can be a part of the conversation without the plugin, and that's phenomenal. So, anyway, worth looking into.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, great. Well, we are about 3 minutes early, so I think this was a fantastic community meeting. We'll set the time next week. Do we want to do one more week on this time, or do we want to move back to our prior time?
I vote for moving back to our prior time.
Okay.
There was conversation of trying to support Asia Pacific.
Let's do one on a normal time, and then we'll do the one after that on Asia Pacific.
Normal time?
Normal time, yeah, exactly, right.
I think you'll find that Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah. I'll put that on 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. UTC, and whatever that is, Central European Summer Time. So, do we have anyone wanting to host next week?
Next week I'll be at KubeCon, but I could do the week after.
I mean, I can host next week if you can add me as the tentative host.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll volunteer for the week after.
I'm happy to help from the hosting perspective on some of these if you guys need someone to.
Sounds good. Yeah, one of our goals is to pass it around to as many people as possible. So.
Yep.
Okay. Just as a warning, I'll come by tomorrow, and I hope you have a KUDO shirt for me.
We do.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah, we don't have a KUDO franchise store yet on our homepage, but we're prototyping.
That's a great idea.
Okay, this is how we monetize KUDO, by the way.
Selling t-shirts.
This is how you monetize open source projects.
All right. How many of those should we sell at KubeCon? Barcelona is going to be filled with KUDO shirts.
The cost is to commit.
You wear one and you get the orders and then we ship them.
But wait, that's actually maybe just a curious question. Do we have stickers by any chance which you could give us so we can hand them out in Barcelona?
So generating some swag is on my list of things to do. I'm just waiting for someone to give me some hard cash.
I have like 10 cents in my pocket. Is that...
I don't think that's quite going to cut it, but...
Okay, so meaning we're not going to have anything over at KubeCon.
So it potentially, how long does it take for sticker turnaround? Nick, haven't we done sticker mule stuff? I can look and see how long it would take to do some KUDO ones for KubeCon.
Let me see whether I could organize it here in Berlin. I got a store around the corner.
4 days on sticker mule, right?
Do you have budget for that? Oh, Matt, we can talk about this offline.
Yeah, let's kill the recording and we can talk about that. Or end this, we talk about that.
Yeah.
I think the recording is controlled over there.
Oh yeah, that's us.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Oh, stop the recording.
No.